Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk, 1180 for the best in Saturday Talk Radio with your host Clay Kerner, and I'm Marty Pay. Clay, great interview last weekend with Greg White and Javier Reyes from the Kern County Young Republicans.
Well, they weren't so young.
You kept on saying that.
I mean, they were in their 20s.
Well, that's young, relatively speaking. I mean,
well, compared to you, it is, maybe.
Well, considering the fact that you're getting close to 20 again, but then again, that's if you add the other digit in front of it. We got into an interesting conversation about the Republican Party that we're going to carry through with the next couple of weeks. Where's the Republican Party going? It's going to be an interesting conversation.
I'm not sure it's going to be a viable party in the near future, especially in California.
Well, we can talk a little bit about that with our guest. The question is definitely going to come up next week when our guest will be Margaret Hoover, the great-granddaughter of President Herbert Hoover, Fox commentator, and author of American Individualism, How a New Generation of Conservatives Can Save the Republican Party. That's going to be a real interesting conversation. She's, lately she's been on O'Reilly. You said she was on Hannity the other night.
Correct.
I saw her on the Today Show, and she had a op-ed at the Wall Street Journal this morning.
And I'm wondering, why is she getting all this play?
Well, she's a very famous person. She has a lot of contacts, and she has an interesting point of view that I don't think you and I agree with necessarily, but it's an interesting point of view.
She's, as far as I can see, she's a liberal Republican.
Well, we can have that conversation next week with her. She's going to be at the Reagan Museum on Wednesday night for anybody that's interested. I'm going to be there, and then we'll interview her the next day. We're going to tape it on Thursday. But it should be a fun, and I can guarantee a very provocative interview.
So who do we have today, Marty?
Today we've got somebody very special. One of our very, very favorite guests, one of our very favorite politicians, and I can say a friend of the show. Drum roll, please, Clay. State Senator Jean Fuller. Jean, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thank you. Great to be here again.
Always a pleasure to have you here. Jean, one thing I wanted to start the show this way, because we usually don't, and it's funny, we were at a function, I think, a month ago, and somebody was talking about your background, and I went, I didn't realize so many of the things that you've done over the course of your background, and I thought, if you don't mind, tell our viewers about Jean Fuller beyond being the state senator.
Well, I guess I grew up in Shafter, and
I didn't know that, by the way.
My family were cotton farmers out there, and then we moved to town because the well went dry one too many times, and I tell everybody that's where I got my passion for water. And then I was... my family basically said that water was a very important thing, and so a guy came along that was a rancher and a farmer, and so I thought he had a well, and I married him, and that was Russell Fuller, and that was 38 years ago.
Wow.
But he was a dry farmer, and he didn't really have a full well, even though he was Fuller. So, we had to go to work, and we've done all kinds of things, property management, and we owned a restaurant. I've also got a PhD and a master's in public administration, and I taught, and I've done every job in the school district except drive the bus. I'm not a great driver. And I negotiated at the table for 11 of my 17 years as a school administrator. And my last district, we had 4,000 employees. So I think I've done a little bit of everything. I've taken pilot lessons and had the opportunity to fly a lot. My husband's also a pilot, and we like motorcycles and planes and rifles and all the fun things that Kern County teaches you about.
Jean, something about not being a very good driver but having a pilot's license.
Yeah, well, the good thing is flying is very different than driving.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
You can fly with one finger, but you have to drive with both hands.
Did you go to public schools or private schools?
I went to public schools. I actually went to Richland Elementary. I graduated from Shafter High, which is where my dad graduated from.
Wow.
And my mom graduated from EB, and then I went to Bakersfield Community College and into Fresno State.
And your major at Fresno was what?
My major at Fresno State was a double major in elementary and secondary education, as well as I got a BA in English and a minor in social science.
Wow, you really have quite a number of degrees.
And then I went to Cal State LA while I was working full-time as a principal in the Lancaster area, and got my master's in public administration, which is what you need if you're going to run a city, and also has a lot of business and collective bargaining classes in it. And then eventually I was a full-time principal out in Palmdale, and I drove to UC Santa Barbara every Thursday night after work and every Saturday for 3 years to get my PhD. And that was before online anything or online library.
And what did you do your thesis?
I did my thesis on how to improve test scores.
Well, I have the answer to that, to cheat.
Well, a lot of people do.
I know, it's terrible.
Did you have to make that trek from Lancaster down to downtown L.A. to go to Cal State L.A.?
Yes, we did that on weekends for 2 years. I mean, I was really lucky. My husband drove me for those 2 years, and that made a great deal of difference for me.
Sure. That's great.
And so anybody that drives you drives you around for 40 years now in this job is a saint.
Well, I've had the pleasure of driving you around a couple times.
Yes, you have. Actually, you have the best way of showing up when I just forgot where my car was.
That's Marty. He just sort of shows up, doesn't he?
Kind of like a bad penny, right? Well, you and I had talked a little while ago. Let's go here first.
Okay.
Next weekend we're having Margaret Hoover on.
Yes.
And I'd given you my copy of the book to take a look at. What do you think? What direction do you think the party's going in? Do you think she's right? With her, and I'll let you explain her thesis. What?
Well, the part that interested me about Margaret, I agree upon her problem statement that the millennium or the newer, younger generation, has changing in different interests than where the Republican Party probably is right now. Mm-hmm. But I see it a little differently. I see it as an incremental growth model. She sees it as like a reform change. In other words, she believes that, according to her book, that the party should maybe move over and become more socially liberal to meet that generation and their expectations, and she believes that they are mostly fiscally conservative and that they value personal freedom. I believe that the younger generation, all of us at one time, really valued personal freedom when we were younger, and we didn't maybe have as much fiscal conservatism until we got our own money, our own businesses, and started raising our own family. And then in American life, we move into a fiscally conservative and socially conservative mode and raise our families and make sure that we're doing all the things we can do in churches and so on. And so my solution statement is different than hers. I believe that we need to have the party grow more earlier at an earlier stage, people to be in businesses of their own and be involved in church and nonprofit and become taking on those more conservative relationships.
We're having a conversation with the state senator, Jean Fuller.
Well, in listening to her on the TV, because I haven't read her book yet, she seems to be extremely liberal. She believes in marriage of same sex. She believes in abortion. These don't seem to be the standard Republican Party format.
I agree.
Yeah. So,
do you feel the party is becoming more moderate? We had this conversation last week with.
No, actually, I feel that the Tea Partiers have been a great addition because it's given a voice to the people who are normally silent because they're happy and they're working and they have a regular life. And now people who have a regular life are speaking up. They're speaking out. They're becoming activists for the way of life that we value now. And so I think that the Republican Party. While a lot of our coastal elements have to be, they're usually fiscally conservative but environmentally liberal, I think it's a step away yet to say that we're moving towards socially liberal as a whole party with all age groups.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Because it's interesting when you talk to a lot of people, say, like you say, in the coastal area, they tend to be more moderate when it comes to social issues, but not quite liberal yet. But it's it's kind of drifting that way. It's kind of an undercurrent in the party that sooner or later we're going to have to deal with.
I don't know if you get over in the Santa Barbara area or the San Luis Obispo area, it's pretty liberal over there.
Well, are the Republicans liberal out there, Gene, would you say? Because that's an area you deal with.
The representation that, San Luis Obispo, for example, has in the past elected is, been Sam Blakeslee, and Sam Blakeslee's family is very fiscally conservative. So I think the theme here is that the Republican Party as a whole is mostly very fiscally conservative and mostly very capitalistic in terms of wanting money to be in the private sector environment so that then those profits can go to the things we need for government as opposed to the other way around. But as we move towards the coast and the younger generation, there's no doubt that there's a more liberal social group.
Well, it seems like the whole election in California is based on San Diego, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. They're the ones that control the direction of the state, at least on a national level.
Well, I think also, though, that we can never undervalue the advocacy of voice. And I think when you look around and you see what a difference, like the Tea Party came out of nowhere. They gave voice to a set of values. And when they did that, they had an impact far greater than their numbers.
Let's pick up there when we come back. We'll be back in a minute on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.